We were on a tour in northern Jordan, somewhere between Qais and Jerash, when we saw the missiles going overhead. We could hear the explosions of the interceptions. From that moment on, Kevin and I were refreshing Al Jazeera and Twitter constantly. The driver of the tour wasn't concerned. He looked up at us and said, this happens all the time. At one point he added, it's kind of like fireworks. Understanding that gap between what we'd just seen and what people around us were telling us is how I approach decision-making when something serious breaks out abroad. I've been a full-time nomad for 12 years, and I've been to a handful of countries when something serious happened. I want to talk through two specific events. Jordan earlier this year, when the war between Israel, Iran, and the US broke out, and Sudan a few years before that, during a military coup. Because they look almost opposite from the inside, but you follow the same framework either way. We were in Jordan from late February through early April of this year. The escalation between Iran, Israel, and the US happened toward the beginning of our trip. We'd only been there for about a week. On paper, the situation looked serious. But what actually happened in Jordan was much more limited than what the news was showing. Jordanian airspace closed briefly, overnight, once. Several nearby countries closed their airspace for much longer stretches. The international news cycle was wall-to-wall, regional conflict across the Middle East. But we weren't booking our flights out yet. We still had weeks of our visit left. The hotel we'd booked back in Amman was safe, and nothing about being on the ground in Jordan day to day felt like a crisis. So we finished the tour we were on that day, got back to Amman, and decided to just wait it out for a few days and see what happened. If things escalated, we'd make a decision then. The goal was to give it enough time to make a better informed call. That decision had another layer. Kevin's dad was scheduled to fly out to join us in Jordan in a couple of weeks. If we left, his trip got canceled or significantly rearranged. So leaving meant canceling 2 trips, not just ours. While we waited, we did the basics. We stuck close to the hotel for the first few days. We kept our passports and a stash of cash in a single bag we could easily grab. We checked flight status and news every few hours. I registered with STEP, that's the US State Department's traveler enrollment program, mostly to make my mom feel better, but also so the embassy would know we were there. Things stayed calm. We ended up doing the full trip as planned. Kevin's dad came too. His original flights got canceled, so we rebooked him on different ones, but he made it. The unexpected bonus? A lot of tours had either canceled or hadn't been able to come because of the surrounding airspace closures. The big sites we visited, like Petra and Wadi Rum, were mostly empty. The lesson isn't always stay. The lesson is always have a local read before you decide what to do based on what the news is telling you. The international news cycle has a stake in the worst version of every story. The people standing on the actual street don't. Sudan was a completely different situation. This was October 2021. I was on the last day of my trip to Sudan. We were in Khartoum for that final day, ready to do our city tour. Then the coup happened. We found out about it very early in the morning when the woman who coordinated our tours showed up at our hotel in person, calling us from the lobby because the internet, the cell service, and the phone lines were all down. We learned about the coup, our canceled city tour, and the countrywide blackout all at once. At that time, Sudan still required a negative COVID test to depart the country. We'd done our tests the day before and we were waiting on the results, so the first thing any of us thought was, one of us has tested positive and now we're going to be stuck in quarantine in Sudan. The coup wasn't even the only thing we were trying to figure out, though luckily none of us had COVID. The blackout was the part I really wasn't prepared for. No way to check the local news, no way to call home, no way to know what was actually happening even a few blocks away. It was somewhere between a day and a half before we had any access to outside information, though we did have some updates from the tour coordinator and the hotel staff during that time. Eventually, the hotel got the internet back. Apparently, a lot of journalists stay at this particular hotel, and the hotel has some kind of backup connection that wasn't affected by the countrywide blackout. I don't fully understand how it worked, but it meant I could finally start tracking what was happening with flights. I wasn't running back and forth to the airport. I stayed at the hotel, which took very good care of us. Meals covered, safe space, and the right ecosystem to gather information. A journalist staying there was going out into the city for stories, so he had updates I wouldn't have had otherwise. Pilots were also staying at the hotel, and they were the ones with real-time contact with people at the airport. When a flight finally came up, I booked it. It was a Badr Airlines flight, not the airline I'd originally been on, and not to the destination I'd planned to fly into. But we didn't know when any of the international carriers were going to start flying again, so we took what was available. The decisions in Sudan were the opposite of the Jordan decisions because the conditions were the opposite. In Jordan, I had information, and the on-the-ground read was that things were calm. In Sudan, I had no information at first, and the on-the-ground situation was that travel had genuinely broken down and that tourists should leave at the earliest opportunity because there was no saying when things would improve. And they haven't. Sudan went through a counter-coup attempt, and then a full civil war broke out in 2023. The point of the story isn't the country itself, but when the on-the-ground read in Sudan was leave at the earliest opportunity, that read held up, and it still does. Here's the playbook that came out of those two situations and a few others. 1. Always check the local read before fully believing what the news is telling you. Coffee shops, taxi drivers, neighbors, hotel staff. The international news cycle isn't lying. It just has a different incentive structure than the people physically next to you. 2. Keep your passports, some physical cash, and a copy of your insurance and visa paperwork in a single grab bag. Cash specifically, not just a card. Internet down means cards down, and you want enough on you to survive at least a few days without ATM access. If you never need any of this, fine. If you do, you don't want to be looking for it. 3. Register with your government's traveler program. Step for Americans. But, and this is the part nobody tells you, don't expect the embassy to actually help you in real time. In both Jordan and Sudan, I had better information through other sources than I had from official channels. Register anyway, because if something really escalates, you want them to know where you are. Just don't make them your primary source. And if you need to get out, don't trust that they'll be the ones to get you out. 4. Know your exit routes before you need them. Where's the airport? Is there an overland border that's opened? What other airlines fly out of where you are? You want the basics in your head before anything happens, especially if you're somewhere that has the potential for instability. And then, if something does happen, keep iterating on what's available. As the situation changes, paths that didn't seem obvious at first sometimes open up. Don't lock in your first read. 5. Don't outsource your decision or your information gathering to a single source. Not the news, not the State Department, not a Facebook group. Triangulate. None of this is a guarantee. Bad things happen and you can't fully prepare. But this is the playbook I actually use, and it's worked in the situations I've been in. Subscribe if you want more honest reads on what nomad life actually looks like.